Welcome to the FML podcast, the podcast on a mission to uncover actionable insights, explore the latest trends, and to catalyze your fintech's growth. Join Growth Gorilla's founder and managing director, Shamir Sajden, and some of fintech's hardest-hitting marketers and leaders.
Welcome everyone to today's episode of the FML podcast. Today we're joined by Sheridan, brand content lead at Chip. Sheridan, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Amazing. So could you share a little bit about yourself and your journey so far and how you ended up at Chip?
Sure. So my name's Sheridan, or Shez, I think is the most common nickname. I am the brand content lead at Chip. So I started at Chip when we were a small little startup, about 30 people, fresh off the boat from Australia in 2019. So just before, the pandemic kicked off, I was a content writer. Coming from Australia, I have a journalistic background. And I just came over because I had a passport and wanted to come to the big smoke from a little city in Western Australia called Perth. And then, I've kind of stayed with Chip since we've grown now into a scale up. So I, progressed through to a content manager, and now very freshly, I'm a brand content lead. So, that's, my journey through Chip. And I think there's probably a job to do with telling people who Chip are. So Chip are a fintech app. Obviously, this is a fintech podcast. We're a savings and investments app. So we like to call ourselves a wealth app. We started off as kind of an app built to automatically save your money for you, and now we kind of offer investing and a few other fun products.
I'd love for you to kind of go through, what is the role of a brand content lead entail? And the reason I ask that is I think where we are now, content covers so much, and it's more than just blogs. So I kind of like you to just love for you to just tell us around, like, what does that all cover? What does your role cover?
A lot of my job is kind of like our social side as well. So content covers video, it covers all our social channels, it covers our CRM, it covers basically anything that you would need, a body of writing that needs to be spoken about in like a Chip tone of voice. So I kind of work across the website as well. If you get a push notification, making sure that's in the brand tone of voice. So kind of just like evangelizing Chip's brand across all our touch points. So that can take on any form, which makes my job super exciting because it means that I'm not just wedded to one medium. I get to work across all of them. And I think it's taking one bit of content and thinking about how we can make it fit for CRM, for an email, for the website. Like, how can we not just, be monogamous to one channel? We try and make our content go as far as possible. So I guess my job is overseeing that, making sure that everything is on brand, delivered on brief, and on time is probably how I would sum up my role, and just making sure that everyone knows who Chip is and everything sounds like Chip, I guess.
Amazing. And only a content person could use the word monogamous and have it make sense in that context.
No, I said it and I was like, that's an interesting choice.
It works. You got away with it.
I'll back it.
Cool. So I think there's two things I kind of want to talk about based on kind of what you said, which is one is talking about, I suppose, the mediums that you work across. And then I suppose the other bit is that tone of voice piece. So it's kind of like start off with the tone of voice piece. So taking a step back in terms of Chip's offering, which is very, very much focused on, I suppose, perhaps challenging the perception of wealth. And I suppose, how do you do that in your role as brand content lead? Let's start with that question first, and then I'll move on to the medium stuff.
So how do I, in my role, challenge the perception of wealth, or kind of how do we communicate that? And I think Chip's tone of voice, we literally had a workshop this morning. So overarching, we want to sell this feeling of achievement. Second to that, we kind of want to make sure we're delivering it in a personal, premium way. And I think the personal element's really important. And this is what we try and carry across all of our comms or a bit of content, is the personal element. That wealth means something different to everyone. we recently did a video which asked different age groups what wealth meant to them. And for some people, it is that traditional kind of like big fancy house. Some people it's financial freedom, and largely financial freedom is the motivation, or like that is what wealthy means, to be empowered to make any choice you want and not be restricted by your finances. So I think it's stripping back the content, making sure it's not too generic, jargon heavy. It's making it, tailored to that person. And I think we really challenge ourselves on that. But, at the end of the day, we are dealing with people's money. So we want to make sure that we're still trustworthy and supportive. And then, coming from the chip brand, like we want to be perceived as, more on the premium side. Like we're dealing with wealth. This is like your long-term financial plan. Like we want to deliver it in a way that makes you feel like you're, a member of like an exclusive club. So we want to, give you that Michelin star service. And I think that's all wrapped up. And my job is to make sure that we're ticking all those boxes with all the content. And if not, like how can we do that for the next bit of content, or is there anything we can do to kind of push that the extra mile, or in the words of my if our CMO and co-founder, 10x is, I guess, like the way that we like to one up content.
Then the second part of that question was around then having to kind of take that approach and I suppose that tone of voice and feeling that you want to deliver to your customers. Does it change? And if it does change, how does it change? And I suppose, what are you taking into consideration when applying that across different mediums? You mentioned social, push notifications, emails, etc. How does that kind of all come together?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely has changed at Chip. So as I kind of said at the start, like we started as a little savings app that was a chatbot. It was very, very colloquial, very casual, uses lots of emojis, which was unheard of for like a banking app. And it was very casual. And as we've kind of matured, so was our tone of voice. So when we start offering products like investment products, you can't be using, whoa, look at that auto. Like you need to just like speak like a grown up, like we're dealing with, proper money here. And, as Chip's like grown up, so is our tone of voice. So we still don't want to lose our personality. So I think it is just, checking in. I think like everyone has a job, particularly in the marketing team, to call each other out. I'm like, okay, I don't think that fits in with our current brand now, or how are we going to talk about this that's going to be in line, like with the moving climate, like be a bit more sensitive to what's going on. And I think it's just open communication, like making sure that everyone has a responsibility to like evangelize the Chip brand, by making sure that, we sit down when there is big like brand pivots or anything like that and say, okay, let's revisit the brand. Let's make sure they all check out. So we literally did that this morning. And then to answer the other question about how it kind of fits across all the channels, well, half of it is like common sense. Like the way that you talk on LinkedIn is going to be a lot different to how you talk on Instagram because of the way that people interact with the platform. And then social media as a whole, like you can't really target, if we're talking about organic social, you can't really target. You do need to take a overall brand, I guess, messaging is more like about your brand awareness than you still engaging with existing customers, but then you go to CRM and it's a lot more tailored and targeted. Obviously, we still have one tone of voice, but I think the language and tone of voice like can be a bit more of one thing, a bit more supportive in this area. If we're talking about, like if it's a service comp, let's be a bit more supportive. But, if we're talking about someone like reaching like £10,000 in savings, like let's really like go in on like achievement and, let's celebrate that win for that person. And that's, the personal brand essence coming through. So, yeah, I think it's just a tailored approach, I'd like to say.
I kind of want to hone in on I suppose one specific channel. I mean, I even dropped Alex a note about it a little while back because it kind of caught my eye, which was your out of home campaign. It was the tube car panels. I think it was the black ads with the writing and whatnot. It was memorable, in my opinion. Taking it apart, what was the approach behind that campaign? How did you decide upon the strategy? And I suppose how did, what was the ultimate then impact of that campaign for you as well?
Yeah, well, this was largely a brand awareness campaign. So it's not like a lot of the more metric-driven tube ads where you would have like a discount code. Like this was purely a brand awareness campaign, like as Chip is aware of that. With a lot of our, I guess, like campaigns, we really try and channel the human emotion element. We need to, appeal to just like the humanity element, I guess. And there was this really good quote, and it's I heard about it from our VP of growth here, and it was an article about the British Airways out of home campaign. I don't know if you remember. It was like all white, and it said, why are you traveling? And it's business, pleasure. And then it was something like to, take the holiday out of the group chat, like some sentence that was kind of like the real reason why we travel. And whoever is in charge of that campaign said something like, to be talked about in group chats, talk about things people talk about in group chats. And it's something about that really struck me. We were able to like hyper relate to something. It was so specific that you were like, oh my God, that's so me. I think, when we talk about savings, it's like, we could be saving for a holiday, or it's like we're saving to go and stay in a villa in the Bahamas where I don't see anyone. And I think that is what relates to you a little bit more. It's like, oh yeah, I relate. And I think that was one of the big components of this campaign, is to make people feel like, oh yeah, I can relate to at least one of the assets. So a quick summary of the campaign. We called it the Real Assets campaign. So the strapline was, you look after your real assets, we'll look after the money, chip your wealth out. And I guess we built out a couple of archetypes where it would be like, I can't remember them actually, Claire's assets, and it was 4 things, like her mum's suede jacket. A lot of these were actually based on my personal experience. So it was my mum's like suede jacket from 1967, jokes in the family group chat. Like they're the things that really important, and we really wanted to acknowledge that and like pay tribute to what's actually important in life, and then bring it back to there's so much more important things that people have to worry about than their money. And I think then that kind of like summed up how effortless and easy it is to, dump your money in chip, and we kind of make it go further. So yeah, I think the relatable human element was really key here. And it was a lot of fun to make. And yeah, it's got a really good reception. And I think that just was enough for us.
So it's very, very clear that you I mean, obviously you put a huge amount of thought in, not just into the campaign, but also what you want, I suppose, your audience to get out of seeing the campaign once they actually read, the content or see the imagery. And, I kind of say this all the time, when I've got quite a sort of extensive sales background, and it's, think about the response that you want the individual to give you when you ask the question. It's quite similar here, which is you've definitely thought about the response or the emotion that you want your audience to feel with the messaging that you're putting out there. I suppose the question is there, from that, how do you think that helps build, an engaged audience and a brand?
I guess like how that impacts us as a brand. I guess like if you can make someone feel something about any of the content you put out, chances are they're going to remember it. I think emotion is an incredibly powerful marketing tool. So you can really, channel that well. I think then, yeah, like brand recall, things like that, like people are going to remember you as a brand. And if you can associate it with the right emotions, then you're in for a winner. And I think, we want people to associate you with, more positive emotions. So then that can in turn change, influence sentiment.
I think, as we kind of talk about, creating emotion, what it is ultimately is creating cut through with your audience, right? And creating that emotion allows that cut through, which then puts your brand sort of front and center, and that kind of gets you ahead of the pack at that point. But I kind of want to talk about the consistency piece of it, because, I've been in marketing for quite some time now, and I've lost count of the number of CMOs I've spoken with. I kind of always come across one or two that will turn around and go, oh yeah, we tried that and it didn't work. But I'm really keen to hear from you, to hear about the importance of consistency. And I suppose, what are your tips on maintaining consistency in messaging across various channels, and then tying that sort of ensuring that consistency across online and offline as well?
The biggest thing I think is just communication within your team, like peer reviewing. I think making sure that the message is consistent is that to make sure that all your channel owners, like behind the scenes, are all talking to each other, making sure you're all singing from the same hymn sheet, essentially. making sure that you're all aligned on, okay, if this is a product, like this is how we're going to talk about it. And if this is, if we're talking largely about chip, this is how we're going to talk about it, and making sure that, not just someone who's in charge of brand is in charge of evangelizing the brand. Like everyone who works at Chip has a job to do with knowing how we talk about Chip and like then more tangibly like what that actually sounds like. One of the big values at Chip is, being accountable, being collaborative. So if you don't think that something is falling within the brand, then just say, hey, I'm going to challenge that, and then we can talk about it. And then being collaborative, I think just like working with each other to making sure that everyone kind of understands that.
And then, we spoke about obviously the out of home campaign and sort of bringing that onto, I suppose, and we kind of touched upon this earlier with talking about different mediums and using, I suppose, you basically just called it common sense, which is the way that you speak on one platform is naturally going to be different from how you speak on another. And obviously, if you're speaking about one product versus another, you kind of need to adjust your tone of voice accordingly. What I'd be interested in is kind of like almost like dig sort of channel by channel. And I think one of the things that our audience is kind of always really, really keen to hear is, any specific strategies that have worked well, that have led to high quality engagement. And maybe the way to ask this is what have been your wins perhaps on across some of the channels, and that you're particularly proud of, that are naturally obviously content related.
In terms of what's gone well, it's like the most least high production stuff over the last year. In terms of social media, the stuff that tends to go viral are the interviews in the street. People love them. There's still a place for our branded content. We have like in-house studio and we have in-house like production team. We do all our videos ourselves, and there's still a place for that, and that does well. But the things that do the best are the questions on the street. They go wild. And I think if you're chasing that account's reach metric, if you want to get in front of as many people as possible, ask a provocative question about money on the street or in the office, and that you really see those returns. I think like by channel, I guess we do really well with CRM and like contacting people like via email. That's quite high engagement, and I think that just comes down to transparent conversational comms, like making sure that we're not just speaking to everyone, we're speaking to you, and involving personalization where we can. LinkedIn obviously operates a little bit different to your, I guess, like content first platforms like TikTok or Instagram. I think what we feel is like if it comes more from someone at Chip rather than Chip the company, that as well has worked well for us. I think it's a lot more authentic, less corporate, and it feels a lot more personal, which again is in line with our brand, and we love to celebrate our wins over there. But yeah, I think they're the main ones.
I mean, it's interesting you talk about like the sort of low production stuff, or the how did you phrase it? Was it lower production value type stuff that seems to be going viral? Is that the man on street type videos that you mean that just seem to be?
I think the comparison is that we've got like a big fancy camera, our mic, our videographer, all of that kind of thing. We do our scripted kind of like brand videos, explainer videos, more like campaign style videos. And then we've got, our content creator, like social media manager, Hannah, who, can film stuff on her phone. It's a bit more ad hoc. It's less of like, we still a space for it because I think it's really good for like brand awareness and just, getting content to go as far as possible with a Chip name on it. And that's just the stuff that is less, it's like high frequency stuff. So I have a fantastic mentor, and she shared with me recently like how to this link to Born Social, who have like basically a breakdown on how to build brand on social. And the way that they structure, which I really like, is like however frequently you want to do this, I think a couple of times a year, you put out like one fame builder piece of content, and that's high production value that really like encapsulates your campaign message, your brand messaging really well, and it's a lot of effort and scripting and all of that goes into that. And that's you only post one of those, and that is like the core of your campaign. Under that, you have short stories. So they're shorter videos, still medium frequency. You're going to post a couple of those, a week, a month. It depends on how long you're running that campaign. And they're like videos, there could be more longer form content in terms of like blogs supporting bits of content that feed into that fame builder. And then under that, you've got distinctive cues. So distinctive cues are just little nudges that relate the campaign back to your product and then nudge people to drive an action. And I think that structure works really well for brand. And that's something that we're trying to lean into and give our content a bit more of like a framework, a bit more of a structure this year. And that way it's easier to build because you're just working like campaigns, right? So that's given us a bit more structure and we're keen to kind of keep going with that because it's, really helped in terms of the production sides of things.
Yeah, that fame builder, I always kind of called it like cornerstone content. So you kind of got like the main bit and then you can kind of like break that into clips and videos and blog pieces and articles and kind of all of that stuff. And I think that's really works really well because then you can then populate that across, TikTok and Insta and on LinkedIn as well if you're B2B, for example. It works really, really efficiently. I think the only downside of that is that, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on this, if you get your cornerstone content or your fame builder piece of content wrong and it's misaligned and you haven't got it aligned to your audience, you've kind of stitched yourself up for that entire campaign period. And that can kind of work against you a little bit as well. So I think there's a degree of having, I suppose, some sort of track record and data before you kind of go whole hog on that. But yeah, would you reckon? Agree or disagree with that?
I mean, we've only been following this kind of format like very freshly. So, we'd have these like big overarching campaigns, but nothing's gone too wrong that I can freshly think of an example as soon as you said it. So I'll get back to you. I'm sure it's bound to happen.
Yeah. Well, in that case, you're probably doing all right. Yeah, it's kind of continuing on from the fame the fame builder piece or the cornerstone content, kind of whatever you want to call it. I just mentioned obviously that in my view, if you're kind of going to have like a piece of content like that that's going to operate over a longer period, up to a year, then it's really important to have some sort of track record and data. It'd be great to hear from your perspective how you leverage data and I suppose insights from your customer base in order for you to do your role in terms of production of content and then making sure it stays on brand as well.
I'm a self-confessed not good with numbers gal. So within the marketing team, we've got, people dedicated to growth and like love spreadsheets and love all those numbers. I guess this is a collaborative impact with that. And like we're making sure that we're always daily checking the numbers. Like everyone has access to look at the numbers. So we're making sure that, we are putting our efforts into things that actually require attention and things that are, do align with the business objectives, which obviously is number based. So we make sure we've got like a really strong reporting culture for each channel. So really recording what's working, what's not, as well as a testing culture as well. So making sure we're A/B testing as many things as we can across all platforms and recording that. So that way we're just continuously optimizing and then banking these learnings. And then when we do come around to a campaign or making something, it's like we know that opening with a hook that is more personal or catchy or something and not related to finance, we know that works. We know that, more movement in these videos work really well. We know that, the street style stuff works well. How can we incorporate, provocative questions? Like, I think it's just making sure that each bit of content is a learning and comparing them against the last bit of content that we did in that style. And then how can we build on that? And I guess like each channel owner is responsible for reporting back on how that bit of content is going. And then we can tailor accordingly. And again, as I said, like earlier, it's collaboration. It's being accountable for your metrics and it's your job to tell someone else like this did really well. And then whoever's in charge of making that content knows to say, okay, I know that, this paid copy did really well when we lead with this and then going from there rather than it being a finger to the wind every time. I think just record how things are going and then we can apply them when it's necessary.
I think that kind of, brings us to almost the final few sort of questions really, which is, and you may have already done it, but I kind of want to give you the opportunity to, but I suppose what advice would you give content creators, particularly in sort of fintech and financial services that are looking to create content that, yes, informs, but actually also connects with their audience as well?
Yeah, I think like asking the question back on yourself, it's like, is this something I would genuinely want to watch or listen to. And I think the challenge of fintech is that talking about finance and talking about money and wealth and investing isn't a sexy topic unless you're like guaranteeing someone like millions. Like it isn't like a sexy topic. And I think our job or part of the challenge, you could find it, part of the fun is like, how can we take something that's quite boring and musty and outdated and grey, and how can we put a relatable spin on it? How can we relate it to a person on the street? And I think that's our job. So I think really thinking about how we can maybe like draw from, what's happening around us, social cues and, what's in the news and relevant things to make something engaging and entertaining. Because at the end of the day, like a piece of content isn't successful unless it's both engaging and entertaining. So yeah, it's part of the challenge, but I think it can absolutely be done.
Before I let you go, I'm going to take you through our quick fire round. What podcasts are you listening to right now?
I just finished one on recommendation from a friend. It's called The Imperfects. I've never listened to it before, so if all the other episodes are crap and you listen to one based on this recommendation, then I'm sorry. But there was an episode about harmony and, speaking your truth. And it was all about how, the downfalls of not being open with how you feel and how that can build into resentments. It's a very like self-help ones. And despite, how annoying Stephen Bartlett is, I actually quite like Diary of a CEO. So I think that one's pretty good. These got great guests and I always learn something from them. So I'm more of a music person than a podcast person lately.
I don't even get me started on Stephen Bartlett. He makes me cringe.
I just don't want to be sold Huel at like 9 a.m. when I'm listening to this podcast. Like, do not market me Huel. I don't want to hear it.
My biggest gripe with him is he's built his little empire on basically what was a lie, and I think it's a bit it's unethical, and that's the thing that bugs me. And I think it's unfair to the younger sort of listeners that listen to him when they shouldn't be, really.
I think he's got great guests. Some of them contradict each other, which is a bit frustrating, but yeah, put him aside. I think his
guest though, yeah, I love it.
Provide a platform for people to learn how to look after their bodies.
But yeah, his guest on Diary of the CEO, perfectly fine though. I'll watch that. The one with Jimmy Carr was pretty good. So, other than Chip, what's your favourite fintech brand?
Monzo. As soon as I arrived here, everyone said get a Monzo card, and I think it's brilliant. It's easy and. Yeah, just Monzo someone. I think it's a good job. They're kind of like Google did it well. You're going to Google something and then now it's I'm just going to Monzo that. So I think they scored there.
What books are you currently reading or would recommend if you're not reading one right now?
I've got 2 on the go. So I've got like a fiction and non-fiction. I think the fiction's called Reward System. It's okay. It was marketed as if you like Sally Rooney. And it's okay. It's like an easy read, something to read before bed, nothing too challenging. And then the non-fiction I'm reading, which is brilliant, it's called The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. And it's, I think the strapline is a spiritual path to creativity. And it's kind of like a workbook, but it really like teaches you how to reconnect with your creative side and things you can do to kind of get back in touch with that, which if you work in marketing, you don't even need to work in a creative industry. I think it's really great. And there's a lot of applicable tools that she talks about, taking yourself on an artist date solo, once a week or once a month. And then also just like morning pages and writing whatever's in your brain, like before you go to bed or when you wake up. And that's, been brilliant. So would recommend that one.
Amazing. Sheridan, thank you very much for joining us on the podcast today. It's been a pleasure having you on.
Thank you. It's been fun.
The FML podcast is brought to you by Growth Gorilla. To find out how our marketing growth experts can boost your fintech's growth, head to growthgorilla.co.uk. And make sure to search for the FML podcast in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else podcasts are found. Don't forget to click follow to ensure you don't miss any future episodes. On behalf of the team here at Growth Gorilla, thanks for listening.